Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, and what a crazy evening. Last night, Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary nomination in the city of New York to be the next mayor of New York, more likely than not, facing a general election against a wide array of candidates, including the incumbent mayor. But Zohran Mamdani, in last night's victory, delivered what many people see as what might be the beginning of the Democratic Party's Tea Party movement. Now, one thing is certain, last night's results shocked almost everybody except probably those at Emerson College, who had a very, very strong poll, the only major pollster to dictate that Mamdani would win the final round of voting in this city. It was a very substantive and very advantageous poll for them because they've gotten it right now 2 cycles in a row, almost to the T. In 2021, they were also the most accurate pollster in the city of New York. So now a track record where they defied expectations and really strong results. But beyond that, this video is not about Emerson College. It is about what we saw last evening, with Andrew Cuomo conceding before the ranked choice voting tabulation even began. What we remember, if you remember back in 2021, was that in the New York City mayoral Democratic primary, all we got on election night was the first round voting. Eric Adams was at 31%, Catherine Garcia was at 20%, Maya Wiley was at 21%, and the question was that in the final rounds of voting, who would end up winning? The way that New York City works is that they have to wait until all of the votes are in before they can start doing the final tabulations. They obviously have a lot of these data points, but they will not release the results until roughly a week after the election, and in this case, it took a little bit longer than that to actually see who was going to win the race. It took about 2 weeks. The announcement happened. Eric Adams was nominated on the Democratic side and was nearly guaranteed victory in the general election. Last night, Zohran Mamdani took a race that many people thought he was going to come up short in the first round, and that it would take the ranked choice voting tabulation to end up coming ahead on election night, or I guess a week after election night. But what we saw last night was nothing short of the most impressive victory we have seen in recent memory in any Democratic primary, whether statewide, nationwide, congressional. This result is one that is only possible because of the campaign that Zohran Mamdani ran. And I have been saying for the past 2 weeks, the momentum was on his side, but Cuomo was the favorite. Evidently, Cuomo was not the favorite. The data we were working with was so far off, which is why I said this poll really completely changed the way I looked at it. That's why I made an entire video talking about it. There had been countless polls saying Cuomo was ahead, but for any major, also reputable, because just because you're major doesn't mean you're reputable. You can take a look at a lot of news agencies that do polls that get it off by 17 points. But in Emerson College in specific, they got it right in 2021. I wish I had listened to them a little bit more, because yesterday I had said, right, the data had suggested, initially speaking, that Cuomo would do well. He came in a month ago. This is the most fascinating part, I think. Maybe not to everyone, but definitely to me. A month ago, on the day of the primary, you will find that it was literally a chance that Mamdani was not going to win at that point. But what we saw, June 24th was primary day, May 24th, Cuomo had a 91% chance of victory. And when you take a look at the data points too, all signs would have suggested that was correct. And in the final month, Mamdani mobilized groups of voters, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of voters that had never voted in a Democratic primary before, not on the presidential level, not on the congressional, not on the statewide level, never in a New York City race. For the first time ever, they were inspired by Mamdani. And you have to ask, okay, well, there's a number of reasons why this might have happened. Mamdani came in on a very bold, very progressive platform that clearly inspired a base in a way that Democrats typically do not. The status quo has not worked for Democrats as a means of mobilizing a base. Now, a Democratic primary, I do not want to conflate with a general election. I still believe that in a general election, sometimes mobilizing the base isn't the only way to win. In low turnout elections, yes. But on the presidential level, that's something to be tried and tested in the 2028 primary and potentially in the general election. But Democrats would do a lot to learn from how Mamdani took voters that Democrats far too often believe will not turn out and vote, and did turn out and vote because of policy ideas, because of the way he ran his campaign, and because of this national discontent for the status quo and establishment in the Democratic Party base that Democrats, in some cases, some of them do really well in polling, but some do not, in terms of their pushback against this Trump administration and their vision for America. Now, Andrew Cuomo, don't get me wrong, was scandal-plagued, but he did come into this race as the frontrunner. You cannot ignore that reality. He came into this at points in time nearing a 95% chance at victory. Talk about an airball situation for Cuomo. It is crazy to think about how far he had fallen. Very popular governor, resigns, completely unpopular, tries to rebuild an image, puts everything on the line running for mayor, and it doesn't work out. And it isn't just that Cuomo was scandal-plagued. Mamdani was uniquely powerful in this race because take a look at what the data had suggested. YouGov and Yale Polling said Cuomo would win by 14. Harris X said Cuomo would win by 24. This is, again, in the final round. This is not, right? This is not just the multi-way. The Manhattan Institute said Cuomo would win by 12. The Center for Strategic Politics, which was a poll conducted by a sponsor named Don't Rank Evil Andrew for mayor, right? Think about that. Dream was the acronym, but think about, they couldn't even find that Mamdani would win. Now, Emerson College, of course, probably very happy today, the fact that they're the only poll here that really sticks out like a sore thumb, but a good one, right? A good one for Mamdani and a good one from a polling standpoint. Emerson College is honestly very much impressed, have been very impressive in recent days, recent years, getting a lot of things right. This is yet another victory for them. But the point is, there are a number of takeaways you can get from this primary race. And a lot of them we will talk about over the coming days. But one that I think was really interesting and the most fascinating part of it all was the national implications for this for Democrats at large. That the Democratic Party under Trump 1 may not be the Democratic Party of Trump 2. And the voters, not the national party figures, the voters are reshaping that vision. Progressives generally had a good night. AOC's slate of candidates, nearly all of them won. And when you take a look at where they were in terms of primarying across the country, for instance, you can find that here in New York State, the progressive Democrats did well. And I know that's not shocking. Progressive Democrats does well. You think about it, it fits what you might expect for New York City and for New York State. But to understand what Mamdani was up against versus what was clearly more on the side of what voters wanted, you start to see exactly how impressive this becomes, even further than what you might have already thought of. When you take a look again at the data points, they all said that Cuomo was going to win. Furthermore, when you take a look at the tens of millions of dollars invested in anti-Mamdani campaigning, it didn't pan out. And Mamdani winning outright last night in this first round is something that cannot be ignored. He might not have hit 50%, but his benchmark to end up coming to a position where he could beat Cuomo in the final round, he only needed to be down, or he could have been down 4 to 5 points. Instead, he's up 8 points, 7 points. That is what is crazy about this. That it was this entire, okay, it's going to be drawn out for a week. Mamdani should not declare victory, but neither should Cuomo. Both of them will be in a very tight race. By the time we reach the final round, it is entirely possible Mamdani wins by nearly 10 points. It is entirely possible that this is one of the biggest political upsets and Democratic primary victories for a candidate in a very, very long time. And I know you guys, we talk a lot about national elections and statewide elections, but New York City has a population larger than 38 states in this country. This is a huge, huge voting bloc and one that Democrats rely on for victory after victory in New York State and across the congressional districts that surround New York City. And so to see that this primary was so heavily invested in, not by Mamdani, who spent just under $6 million, Cuomo spent over $30 million. This race was Cuomo's to lose, and lose he did. And Mamdani outperforming. And so now when we think about, okay, Democratic Party, Tea Party, this is the entire focus of this video, and for good reason. Where does this play into things? Well, I already talked about the establishment, but to that point as well. I do think Mamdani's policies largely are popular amongst the base of voters in New York City. This is a city where 60% of voters are registered Democrats, 11% are registered Republicans, right? So this is a very Democratic policy city. Don't get me wrong. At the same time, that juxtaposition between Cuomo, who very much represents the old guard, who was endorsed by the old guard quite literally, Bill Clinton endorsement, a number of U.S. representatives endorsed him, and to their point, right, they knew Cuomo very well. They knew he was scandal-plagued. But for many of them, Bill Clinton, for instance, had appointed Andrew Cuomo to serve in his administration in the 1990s. But again, that speaks to a point. Zohran Mamdani, who was in grade school at that point that Andrew Cuomo was serving in the administration, you're talking about the same people faced up against each other to meet the present-day moment. It's not really that much of a jump to see why some voters would prefer young blood, would prefer somebody new, and even if they didn't 100% agree on policy, were opposed to Cuomo, who represented a lot of what they did not like about the Democratic Party, including, obviously, have to mention, the scandals that surrounded his leaving of office back in 2021. And so, I think that this evening cannot be taken away from Mamdani. Now, in the general election, I still think he faces slightly of a competitive, point. Maybe it'll be a little bit closer, Mamdani and Eric Adams, but really speaking, it'll probably be Mamdani, especially as the Republicans stay in this race. But, not probably, it will be Mamdani. But when you just look at the way that this has really shapen the results of this primary that progressives and left-wing candidates typically had not ever been hopeful about. In 2021, they were defeated. They've been defeated before. New York City had a Republican mayor twice in this century, right? When you think about that, since the year 2000. So they're at a point where New York City has not always been as conducive to progressive candidates, to left-leaning candidates, to people who are more to the side of progressive than center in the Democratic Party. And Mamdani broke records last evening, turning out voters, turning out bases that we simply did not know would ever be engaged in electoral politics until now. And that's what I think about when we talk about this Democratic Party Tea Party. The Tea Party movement, which overturned a significant number of Republican incumbents, enraged the GOP base that many Republican voters did not think was adequately pushing back against Obama and a Democratic Party that had just ushered in the most massive victory they had seen since Bill Clinton. And what happened there was that you got that whole new wave of Republican leadership. A whole new wave of a Republican set of congresspeople, governors, senators, presidential candidates that represented a GOP that their voting base wanted, but that the current incumbent members were not meeting that moment. And I think what we might see over the next year is that the Democratic Party's idea of primarying older incumbents, primarying incumbents that don't vote party line, might become more and more popular. And while there will be electoral ramifications of primarying incumbents, undoubtedly, you are always in a better position, barring a few examples, but few exceptions. But generally speaking, in Congress, the re-election rate in the House is 90%. Why? Because incumbents typically have a hold on their district that even if the district moves a little bit away from them, generally speaking, they can bring it on back. So maybe there will be some electoral implications. But at the same time, in those safe districts, you will very much see, with Mamdani as the example, a number of Democrats who decide to run that are younger, that look like the new Democratic Party versus the Democratic Party of the 1980s, and you will find that they will run, and many of them will win. And I think that this is the moment, not 2017 and not 2018, not 2019 and not 2020, and certainly not during the Biden administration. It is now that you are seeing a newly formed vision for the Democratic Party. How they will perform electorally, don't know. They could win, they could not win. But this is the moment that Democrats are looking for a new generation of leadership, and New York City was an example. It was not the beginning, and it's certainly not the end. It will continue. Primarying candidates has become much more common. Running against incumbents has become much more common. In the primaries we've seen, Virginia as an example, a number of incumbents faced competitive primaries. Why? Because Democratic Party voters are just simply looking for something else. They want a new party, to a degree, not a new party. I think that's putting it too extreme. But they want new leadership to some degree. And it doesn't just mean, congressional. It doesn't even mean that it has to be new leadership between Jeffries and Schumer. That's not the point I'm making. Leadership in general is how I think a lot of Democrats view their party and how they view their opposition to Trump. And right now, Democrats are discontent with their own party. Polling shows that the Democratic Party's approval rating is at the lowest point it has been in the 21st century. Not under Trump 1, not under low points of Biden and Obama, not under even the lowest points for the Democratic Party in 2001. Right after 9/11, the Republican Party saw the highest uptick in public support they have ever seen this century because of the rally around the flag effect for President George W. Bush. It's 2025. The Democrats have an approval rating of 29% nationwide, and something has to change. And Mamdani, who I think last evening inspired a lot of hope and a vision for a lot of New Yorkers and a lot of Democrats nationwide that they simply did not think was comprehensible or practical in this election, in this year, in this day and age. They found out that it was possible, and they made it their reality. And so last night, I think, will be a lesson to be learned about the way Mamdani ran his campaign against the millions of dollars that were poured against him, against an establishment name, in a race where you have multi-way races, what coalition building means. Brad Lander and Mamdani's cross-endorsement, what that means. And so New York City, mayoral race, one to watch, one to learn from, and one that will likely predict and foretell a lot of close and competitive primaries that we might see and might catch some incumbents lacking in the next year, looking ahead to how Democrats are in a position now where the Tea Party movement on their side might have just begun. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.